So funny how we kind of mirror each other sometimes. Uh, we're totally there,
Yeah.
pulling the same cards.
Oh
It's
my gosh, what?
whenever I'm pulling from another oracle card deck, I feel like I'm cheating on you. I really struggle with that now.
Welcome to the Angelic Frequency Podcast. We are your hosts, Cristina Aroche
and Luisa. And today we had a great conversation about faith, surrender, and just moving through life with the support of the angels. And you're definitely going to laugh when you see how we even got there, because I guess that's exactly what we needed to hear today. So that's what we're talking about. So enjoy.
Okay, so the theme that I've noticed, at least for myself, I don't know if this has happened to you for these last, I don't know, maybe like the last week or two, is that, and maybe this is part of the process of surrendering that the divine is always constantly wanting to teach us. But I feel like anytime that I have had some sort of a plan or trying to make a plan, it feels like it just gets scrapped. And at least through just what I usually do on a day to day, like showing up or doing videos or whatever, it has felt very much this energy of like, stop trying to pre plan and just show up and just trust the energy that's showing up. Like this happened to me on a recent YouTube live that I did. I feel like there's this energy that I've been in right now of like, just show up and allow what's wanting to come through to come through. I don't know if that's been your experience or how you
Interesting.
go through the process of surrender, but that's just what's been coming up for me.
You know what? That's interesting because I've experienced the same thing, kind of. Yeah, really scattered, trying to plan. It doesn't really work. Shifting plans. And so I think I've been moving through the same energy. And whenever I pull cards and try and just like get an answer, like what's going on? What am I meant
Yeah.
to do? Show me an next step. And it's like,
Yeah.
allow space for the divine to come through and just let it happen kind of
Right.
idea. So I think there's something to it. We've been talking about divine feminine and surrendering and all of that, and we're
Yeah.
really bad at actually doing it in real life. So I feel that's sort of the flavor of the week for
Yeah.
sure. It's like allow it to happen and just,
Right.
you know,
Stop trying to control
stop
it and
trying to
allow
control
it.
everything and just allow the divine to come in and figure it
Yeah.
out for you.
Yeah.
And it's really hard.
Yeah, it totally is. It's so hard. And it's just like it's such a human tendency to try and control everything, and just trying to like, and it's not because I feel like for many of us, it's not even because we're wanting to control. It's just this innate, like, I'm just going to try to start doing things because I think maybe it's this reaction within ourselves of if we're in control, then we're actually making things happen, or we are creating this sense of safety, or I don't know what it is, but it's really hard to surrender and really hard to trust in the fact that, well, if I let go of my plans, that the divine is actually going to step in and like guide me to the next thing. You know what I mean? Like, why is that so hard?
I don't know. It's so hard to trust. And then we've seen it like with our
Yeah.
relationship and life and lately and things like that, where when you do let go and when you do trust, things do happen.
Right.
Out of nowhere, they'll make it happen. They're on it.
Yeah.
It's so hard to trust and have like fully have faith
Yeah.
and let go. But it also
Yeah.
feels so passive to just wait and
Yeah.
see.
Right.
Sometimes it's really scary.
Yes.
But the thing we have to trust, I guess, is that they have the full picture, right? We can't really see the whole plan, the unfolding, the purpose of certain things. And I've been saying this for the last few days as well. Doors are not closing. There's always a window opening,
Yeah.
right? And
I
things are
love that.
happening for you, not to you. So
Yes.
trust that whatever happens, challenging or not, it's meant, there's a purpose to it and it's meant to happen in a certain
Right.
way, even if it feels uncomfortable. And it's just, yeah, it's so hard.
Yeah.
And the dealing with that, sitting with that discomfort and trusting is really hard.
Yes.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's too part of just, I think sometimes people might think like, well, if something's happening for my highest good, then that means it's going to be like easy or flowing or not difficult or not uncomfortable or whatever. But that's not necessarily true. Like something that's happening or unfolding that is for your highest good isn't necessarily like as it's unfolding. There's no guarantees about it actually being comfortable or that you're not going to resist it. And I think that's a huge challenge in our brains because you're thinking, well, yeah, of course I want what's for my highest good. But then there's also the side of it that's like, but I don't like the way that we're going there. Like, I don't like
Like, what's happening? This doesn't feel good at all. Yeah, I think that's part of the challenge and moving through, but nothing makes us grow more and faster than a challenge and a
Yeah.
challenging situation, right? So it's for your highest good. It's not feeling great. Rely on the angels, call on them to help you move through that discomfort. But on the other side of it, that's your highest good. And I think that's what we try to focus on it. And for the past couple of weeks, I've been saying, like, show me the window, show me the
Yeah.
window, like speaking to the, okay, this door is closing, but please show me the actual light
Right.
at the end of the tunnel because I don't see it and I don't get all of these that's happening.
Why is it whenever we're talking, I feel like immediately like they're start to step in and they're just like, okay, like I don't know, I feel like there's guidance coming through right now, so we'll just go
Yes,
with what
yes.
they're saying. And
Um,
also, it's linked to just a recent experience. Was it yesterday or the day before? It was very recent where I had, I don't know, it's weird how it happened, but like I almost had this like vision of seeing myself sitting on my bed and like pulling cards from uh Rebecca Campbell's Oracle card deck called the Rose. I think it's called the Rose or
yeah.
whatever. Is that
Oh,
one? You know
nice.
that
You have
one?
one?
I
Yeah.
have
I
that.
didn't know you had
And
that.
before I made my Archangel Oracle card deck, that was my like go-to deck. That was my
Oh,
favorite deck that I've ever had. That
interesting.
one, and there's another one that are like my two favorites. And now, of course, I'm a little biased with the other one.
Of course.
But anyway, so I saw myself pulling cards from like it was so weird how that happened. So I ended up having kind of some space to myself and time to myself in the afternoon. So I was just like, I just felt this pull, like, sit on your bed, pull some
Mhm.
cards. I thought, okay, I will. And then when I did I got two cards that popped out, and both essentially had a very similar meaning, which was this energy of this like death and rebirth. I forget what the exact card was now, what the name of the card was, but it was like this death and rebirth energy of like letting things go. And then
Mhm.
also this energy of new beginnings, like you're stepping into something new. And they're like this whole energy, like both cards were very similar. But the thing that I remember on one of the cards, or in the guidebook, I should say, is at the very end after the description it says, it has like a reflection prompt or whatever, and it says something along the lines of, what are you afraid of letting go of because you're afraid that the divine won't come in and support you, or something along those lines, that you're afraid that the next, again, like the window won't open. What are
Right.
you afraid of, where are you afraid of closing the door, essentially, bring into the context of what we're talking about, that what are you afraid of the door? What are you afraid of closing that you're afraid that the next window won't open? And I just thought it was so interesting because to me, it also felt like a representation of how who we are being, essentially, is what it felt like, in the sense of, when we're at like in these moments of really needing to trust or to surrender alongside the physical or environmental shifts and changes that might be happening, it feels like a question of, how are we being guided to evolve? Like, what past way did I used to operate, or did I used to think about things or whatever that served me before, that I'm being called to let go of so that I can evolve into the next version of myself? Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? So it's kind of like this evolution into the next,
Whatever comes next.
whatever comes next. Yeah.
It's a again, so funny how we kind of mirror each other sometimes. Uh, we're totally there,
Yeah.
holding the same cards.
Oh my gosh, what?
Whenever I feel like whenever I'm pulling from another oracle card deck, I feel like I'm cheating on you. I really struggle with that now. I have Rebecca's oracle card deck, but it's the Starseed one.
Mm-hmm.
I really love it, but I've been curious about the rose one. So anyway, side
Yes.
note. But I've been pulling the same kind of cards for the last couple weeks now.
Wow.
Around, you've been just ruminating on this challenge situation, whatever it is, so much that you're not allowing divine guidance and
Right.
solutions to come through. You need to let
Yeah.
go and trust.
Yeah.
So also like divine protection and new beginnings, new opportunities, and like an invitation to step into what comes next. And
Yeah.
also a very clear indication of you're not letting this happen. You're the problem. Trying to,
Yeah.
have faith and surrender and allow us to do our job. You just
Yeah.
surrender and let go. And I've been getting, and I took a picture of that spread, so I'll show it to you so that you laugh. Because essentially it's a combination of divine protection and faith messaging
Mm,
with
yes.
surrender. Let us
Yes.
let us let us help you.
Yeah. Stop getting in our way. We're trying to do
We're
something
trying to help you, we promise. And yeah, and I guess sometimes in life that's kind of the thing. We tend to overthink situations so much that we're
here. Yeah.
not able to see the forest, right? We're
Yeah.
getting lost because we can only see the tree in front of us, and we're missing the point. We're missing,
Yeah.
what they're trying to show us. So I guess that's part of the exercise. And how to lean on them,
Right.
support and guide us through this process, and comfort
Yeah.
us. I don't know.
Yeah.
And give us the tools that we need at the time, to just surrender and let go. Is there an angel of that can help with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. In general, I would say they're all kind of there as that support, but when you asked that question, I felt Archangel Gabriel and Archangel Raguel as the two that step forward
Mm,
specifically. So it's kind of an interesting thing because I feel like I think in the context of what we're talking about and probably, in general for people, those are the two angels for them to call on. But then also, maybe someone's working specifically with Archangel Metatron or Archangel Ariel, and
mhm,
they're still going to support them with that process too. But Raguel and Gabriel feel like really strong energies coming forward right now as we're talking about this. And the thing that I was also going to share is that one thing that I find is helpful for me if I'm in that overthinking, kind of like dissecting energy of just thinking about the same thing over and over again, is that I will just set the intention and almost imagine myself like, okay, you know what, guys? Like I'm talking to all the angels, I'm talking to God, I'm talking to everybody, and I'm like, here, I'm giving this to you. So I'll imagine as though whatever the thing is that I'm thinking about is like this ball of energy,
mhm.
or like a weighted ball of energy, like a lot of weight. And I'll just say, okay, here, you guys take this because
Yeah.
I'm surrendering this to you. I'm surrendering this to you. And I feel like sometimes that can be helpful in the sense of you're actively in a state of I'm noticing that I'm overthinking this or constantly, worried about this or whatever. And I recognize that it's not my job to try and figure it out right now. So I'm going to actively like tell myself and set that focus of I'm surrendering this to you. I'm surrendering this to you. I'm surrendering this to
Yeah.
you kind of a
I
thing.
think
And
you
I just
mentioned that
imagine.
a
Yeah.
while ago, and I've been practicing that, and it's been so helpful, especially when those thoughts or situations start to create stress and anxiety or
Yeah.
fear around certain things. It's like I've been working with Raphael because that's what came up for me, but I'm
Yeah.
also like, "Eh,
Yeah.
you,
Like you take this.
you take care of it. I don't want
Yeah.
it." And
Yeah.
it's a fun approach to life in general.
Yeah.
When you have a problem or something comes up and you're like, oh, how am I gonna solve this, or how are we gonna do that? And I've developed this over the last little bit, and I'm like, well, how are we going to do that? I guess you're going to have to
Yeah.
figure it out. But I'm just not even worried about how am I. So it's not an I
Yeah.
need to figure this out situation, but team.
Right.
Let's
Right.
like, what are you going to do about this?
Right.
How is this going to unfold? I'm curious. But it shifts away the responsibility or
Yeah.
the weight of the, having to figure something out or being
Yes.
scared about something or an outcome. And you're like, how are you going to do this?
Right.
What
I
do
love,
you do with this? Kind of have a different approach. So it's also a moment of levity that even just
yeah.
that thought is just so fun. And that alone relaxes you and just
Yeah.
lowers the anxiety around situations.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
yeah, and trusting the unfolding. It's funny because I've been playing with this and actively asking them questions and have this monologue. And it's not my my monologue, but having an active conversation with them in my
Right.
thoughts. And so I will, I don't know, I'm late for work, something happened that morning, things are off the rails, and I'm about to go to work, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm so late, I wonder what time I'm gonna get there, how are we gonna do this, please help me, and speed up traffic or whatever.
Yeah.
And there'll be like an internal knowing about, you're gonna get there at this time. I saw the number in my mind.
That's
I
so
was like,
cool.
no, that's so late. That's impossible. No. And like maps was giving a completely different time. And I'm like, no, that can't be real. And then I got there, of course, at the time that I saw in my mind.
Oh my
And I'm like,
God.
okay. So that active dialogue also starts to create answers
Yes.
and some sense of safety around, this is what's going to
Yeah.
happen. It's going to be fine. Uh,
Yeah.
and so
Exactly.
the meeting ended up being moved to a different time. So I was actually on time and ahead of schedule. So it wasn't a problem as much as I thought. So the trusting and the faith and the
Yeah.
whatever, right? So you just want a certain outcome, and we're so stubborn sometimes. And it's like,
Yeah.
I need to be there at this time. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, honey,
Yeah.
that's
Exactly.
not how it's going to go. And it's fine. Don't worry. We got you.
Exactly.
So it's those simple little things, but just opening it, it all comes back to communication. Open up the line,
Yeah.
talk to them, rely on them, call on them, uh, and just have those fun conversations. It'll help so much just not to feel like you're dealing with life on your own,
Yeah.
that
Totally.
you're in community
Yeah.
with them, um, and just to have someone to bounce things off of in a weird way. It's
Yes.
fun.
Totally. Yeah. I love that you said that because that's exactly what I was thinking too is the reason why that happened the way that it did is because you open up that line of communication with them. Like
Mhm.
you invited them in, you're talking to them like, okay, like please help me with this or how are we going to get to work on time or whatever the thing situation is, but then it's also I love this so much because in your head, your solution was, I need to get
Yeah.
to work on time. Their
Yeah.
solution was, we're going to push the meeting back so you'll be fine, kind of a thing. You know
Exactly.
what I
So
mean?
the thing about control is that we see one way
Yes.
through one solution. So we're so focused on asking for a specific outcome that
Yeah.
we're missing the mark. That's not for your highest good. What's actually going to
Right.
happen is this other completely different thing that you didn't even think about. And
Yes.
that's what's going to work best for you. And that's how we're going to do it best for
Yes.
you. So that's,
Oh
I
my
guess, the
God.
surrender in, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's done. It's been dealt with. There's a plan. You just
Exactly.
communicate, put it in their hands, and trust and let go. And yeah,
Exactly.
it's so helpful whenever I'm feeling anxiety,
Yeah.
just overall. And sometimes they'll show me a solution. I'm like, no,
You're
that's not.
like, I don't like that. Next, give me a different
Next,
option.
yeah, moving on. I
Yeah.
don't like that one.
Yeah.
And then you go back and you're like, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's how
Yeah.
we're gonna
That's
do it, and it's gonna
That's
be
what it
fine.
is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and you were right. But it only
exactly.
happens when you communicate and trust.
Exactly. And then I think too in that trust it's the going with the flow and just allowing yourself to go with the flow of the energy. Like I've noticed that too, even just an example that's coming up is even with my kids, like if I try to be very rigid of like, we're doing this right now, or this is what we gotta go do. I'm sure you've had, and anyone who has small kids
Yeah.
had that experience of we gotta get out the door, and they're like, no, I don't want to, or whatever. And so in those moments, it's the very similar of that, like, how can I let go of my rigidity of this is how it needs to happen, and instead kind of go with the flow, meet them with where they're at to help them kind of catch the wave to go with the flow. You know what I mean? Like, what do I need to change about my energy? What do I need to change about how I'm approaching this, or how I'm communicating it to them, so that they start to kind of go with the flow and like, oh yeah, that's a fun idea. Like, I should put my shoes on, like making it playful or whatever.
Yeah.
But in that same sense of just, like, when I'm trying to be rigid and when I'm trying to control them, they resist it more, So it's very similar, I feel like, in our everyday life when we're rigid and we're trying to control the outcome, what we're trying to accomplish in some ways feels more resistant, or like it's not happening, or it just feels harder, or whatever the experience is, because we're being too rigid. And the divine is like, stop being so rigid. There's a different way. Get
Let
with
me
the
do it.
flow.
I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. You talked about this idea of like they're building the bridge to get you to the other side, to get you where you want to be.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily going to look like you imagine. But it's okay. There's so many paths. You just
Yeah.
need to get there, right? So
Yes.
it doesn't matter how. And potentially they're going to come up with an incredible solution that you never thought it was possible. So,
Yeah.
but it's just so hard, honestly. It's just so hard to let go, I guess. Just a simple practice, just putting it in their hands and trusting that it's going to unfold how it's supposed to unfold.
Yeah.
That's what
Definitely.
works with me the most
Yep.
lately. Okay, I'm trying to think of a question here for the angels.
They're on the line. What do you
They're
got?
on the line,
Angel
so
Gabriel is here.
show me the question. But it's how do we work on? I guess we're generally speaking about faith.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
you're
Faith and
targeting
trust and
faith, like
surrender. Yeah.
how do we increase our faith, or yeah, how
Yeah.
do we strengthen our faith,
Yeah.
and how?
So immediately what comes through it, like I said, Archangel Gabriel is the one who's on the line right now. But the immediate thing that I felt coming through from him is that it's about recognizing that faith is like a muscle, and that it's a practice, and that it's
Mm.
something that we have to choose versus feel like it's just there. You know what I mean? Like, I have to choose to lean into faith versus just expect myself to have faith, if that makes sense, like, depending on the situation. So what I mean by that is kind of like, if I'm faced with a situation that is creating anxiety, fear, whatever, it's kind of like, well, in this moment I get a choice. In this moment I have to choose faith, and I have to choose to lean into that. And so that is going to look different for everyone. And the first thing that I would say to just start that off, and I always do this anytime I'm like, but like, how do I actually trust? Like, how do I actually do that? The first thing that I always say is, I'll, like, as a prayer to the angels, is I'll say, help me, show me, what does faith look like in the situation for me? Like,
Oh,
help me to lean into the faith, because I'm having a hard time right now with this faith thing. I'm having a hard time with this trust thing. So please reveal to me, show me what that would look like in my everyday life. And so I asked them to show me what that would look like. And
mhm.
so that might then show up in your life as an example where maybe you have an aha moment that drops, or
Mhm.
maybe you come across a book that says something, or maybe you just simply have an experience where maybe you just wake up, or like maybe you go on a walk or whatever, and you just feel this deep connection with them, and you're like, oh, that's what faith is right now, is just
Mhm.
knowing that they're with me. So I would say faith is a different experience for everybody and also within different contexts and situations. Like I feel like faith looks and feels different.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So there's no like exact thing like this is what faith is. And so and then also understanding that it's like a muscle, which means that it's not just black or white. It's kind of has like a spectrum where, where are you on that spectrum? And then same thing how you think of a muscle, you can strengthen it. So you strengthen it through practice by working out or whatever, lifting weights. And then with faith, it's the same thing, thinking of it as it's a way in which it's a practice that you develop. And then thinking of it too, this just is coming through right now as I'm saying this, is if you think of, it's like, again, the muscle analogy. Like if you think of if you're lifting weights and over time you're able to lift heavier weights because your
Mm-hmm.
muscles are getting stronger,
Mm.
then it's the same thing with our faith, where as we practice our faith in different situations within our life, big things, small things, all the things, then eventually that muscle gets strong enough that it's able to lift heavier things, which then allows us to be able to step into more or into a more expanded version of ourselves, because that expanded version of ourselves requires more faith. So if you are on a path that you are wanting to become, whatever you're wanting to become, whoever you're wanting to be, that requires this deeper level of faith that can only be built like a muscle through
Yeah.
practice. You know what I
I
mean?
love that so much. Yeah, it makes absolute sense. Yeah, totally. And if you can tackle a simple thing like, there's gonna be parking when I get there, like
Yeah,
we can
exactly. Yes.
just go on it,
Yeah.
then that naturally will help
Yeah.
you trust in the bigger challenges in life, and how you're in
Yeah.
those situations later on. That
Right.
absolutely makes sense, and
Yeah.
I love it so much. So you can start off as simple as, because I'm thinking of other examples and other ways in which, now that you put it like that, that I've developed trust other like beings for other
Right.
things. For instance, and this is Saint Santa Lucia. Saint Lucia. Like,
Ooh,
what is her
okay.
name?
Yeah, I don't know, but I love how you said it in Spanish, so we're just gonna go with that.
We're gonna go. Yeah, if you get it, you get it. There's a saint,
Yeah.
Santa Lucia. Uh,
Yeah.
so she is good at finding things, and I grew up with this kind
Mm.
of overall
Mhm.
acknowledgement that whenever you can't find something, you
Yeah.
say, "Santa Lucia, please help me find
Yeah.
this thing." And she's on it, and you'll find your keys, you'll find your whatever you're
I just
looking
got chills, by the way, when you said that.
for. Yeah, because she is on
That's
it.
so
She'll find
cool.
anything for you. She's so efficient. Some things take longer than others, but you'll find it. I
That
mean,
is
I just relax. I'm
amazing.
like, I can't find my AirPods for a week.
Yeah.
Please, Santa Lucia. Like, I need to, and I have absolute certainty that they're gonna turn up.
That's
It's don't
so
worry.
amazing. I'm gonna share that with my husband because he's constantly losing like sunglasses, AirPods,
It's
something
better
else.
than AirTags. Yeah, she's really on it. And
That's
so
awesome.
I've grown up with like that's just how you find things.
Yeah.
And so I've done it my whole life. So at this point, it's just a reflex,
Yeah.
right? I'm like, gosh. And honestly, it happened with my AirPods, and I
Yeah.
ended up finding them on the street days
What?
later, and I found them. And I'm like, oh, thank
No.
you. I guess that's not how I wanted to find them, but I found them. Uh,
That's
but yeah,
wild.
she's that effective. So anyway, if anyone doesn't know, we'll figure out what her name is and put it on the notes. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I've never heard of that, but this is amazing,
Santa
and I'm gonna
Lucia.
call on
I
her.
don't know what she's a saint of even, but for me,
Right.
she just finds things.
Yeah.
So we'll figure out who she is and give her the proper acknowledgement and respect she deserves.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and so it's those little things. And I guess with
Mm,
angels, I've started to do that more and more with
right.
simple things like also parking and silly things like
Yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah.
that then lead into other
Bigger thing.
bigger things like challenges and situations where I'm like, how are you gonna
Right.
how are you gonna do this? I don't see
Yeah.
it.
Exactly.
And it happens and it works out, and somehow we find a solution. So I guess, yeah, it's less intimidating to think about it like that,
Yeah.
and building that relationship and working your way up to
Yeah.
miracles, like, and then the bigger things that you're like, oh,
Yeah.
that's impossible, and then you can
Right.
work your way up to those things.
Exactly.
And people, I guess that's how people perform miracles, or
Yeah.
just having that
Absolutely.
absolute faith and trust that the divine is
Yeah.
handling that, and it's working through them, and then there you go, it happens.
Yeah. So the thing that I what you just said is such a great point because I feel like we see people in that like bigger faith energy and we think from where we are we have to jump to that big thing instead of seeing most likely like 99.9% sure that their journey was a whole series of little faith moments building up building up building up building up to be able to get to that bigger thing. And so it feels like a very similar thing for us, like just anybody on the journey, whatever you're wanting to step into or whatever your journey, however it's unfolding, whatever direction you're going, understanding that you are like your process to get to where you desire to go, even if it feels really big or really far or whatever, is actually made up of all these little small moments of faith building practices and exercises that are leading you to where you're wanting to go. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like this understanding that, and I was thinking about this earlier when you were talking with regards to, people on the journey of wanting to know their purpose or how do I step into my bigger purpose or a bigger impact that I want to create or whatever. And it's this awareness that as you step into that or as you're moving through the journey, you're going to be stepping into that by the organic situations that show up on your path that are asking you to deepen your level of faith, that are challenging you in some way, and understanding that that is deepening your faith so that you can then hold what the bigger thing is. You know what I mean? And then in the end, it's kind of like what you said, performing the miracle, you know?
I do get it, and I see it when I see other people in this space, and for instance with you, just relating to you on a human level, when we see that you're a normal person that started to work on certain abilities, and over time build up
Yeah.
to being able to channel the angels,
Yeah.
as if it was something normal that everyone does. um, but that you can get there, and there's a progression and there are steps to it, and that we can do it, was just it just changed the whole thing for me, because before it was very black and white. You either have it or don't,
Right.
just like with faith, like,
Yeah.
I guess, and certain people can do things because they have that level of faith, but it's something we can work towards, and just learn and get there over time. It's so comforting, and so amazing to know that we can get there, we can do anything, we set our minds to. So yeah, I totally relate to that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I feel like the most important part to all of that is our foundation that we have with the divine. And I feel like for me, and I've shared this before in, I don't remember where, different places, various places, but I feel like for me, that, and I've started to talk about it as it's a kind of like trio of the connection with myself, with God or source or divine energy, whatever you want to call it, and then with the angels. It kind of feels like this internal connection with myself, this connection with the greater power that created all of us, and then the angels that are here surrounding us and supporting us as we move on that journey. And I feel like giving time to all aspects to understand that relationship, deepen that relationship, honor that relationship has helped with the faith part as well. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. And it's all working together as a system.
Yes.
And then there's also then the little things and the magic starts happening when all of that working together, and they start communicating with you, and then you'll get
Yeah.
the validation that you were looking for, and the little signs and symbols and things that come through that are like, okay, someone's listening and this did happen, and then it
Yeah.
all incrementally adds to that, just like today, and we
Yeah.
didn't want to believe, right? So just
Yes.
comparison behind the scenes, we were like struggling to define like what was the topic of today's conversation, and they
Right.
were giving us, crickets, and we're like, okay, maybe we'll talk about this, maybe we'll talk about that, and then trusting that, as it always does, the conversation will end up being whatever we need to talk about that on the day, and having faith that they have it figured out, they know what they want to talk about, we just need to go along with it, and just trust
Exactly.
have faith
Exactly.
in what comes up, and not being so stubborn in trying to dictate where the conversation is going to go necessarily. But yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. Very recent example of,
Yeah.
of something that we were being very stubborn, and they were like, no, stop that.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, they would have us trust in ourselves enough to just hit record and trust that the conversation will go where it needs to go. And of course, this is the topic.
Exactly. That's the actual topic of today.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
so funny like that. And then there's that. When you start to see that,
Yeah.
um, it's just so amazing to go through life feeling like they're with you every step of the way, and you have someone
Exactly.
to laugh about things, to complain about things, to, you know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
so great.
Absolutely. I feel like it's as you do it, as you just move through it, and then it gets reflected back to you, that also contributes to the deepening of the faith because now you saw the example and you're like, "Oh, okay, so I A know that I can do it, and B, I just saw the example of how it feels for me to be in surrender and for it to be reflected, in whatever I end up doing and how that ends up whatever that ends up being the result for me. I just saw the whole process so I can do it again.
So jumping to what the practice can look like and what can we do.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Like I said, I think the first one is what we already talked about is that visualization of like, here, I'm handing this to you, I'm surrendering this to you, kind
Mhm.
of a thing. But then it's also like, okay, so what do I do instead? What do I focus on instead?
Mhm.
The one thing that I find that helps me, and I find that this is something that every person can kind of just intuitively connect with or just begin to reflect on for themselves what that thing is. And I do also feel like depending on the exact situation, you're tuning into yourself and noticing what is it that my body needs to get present and embodied into this moment. So, for example, sometimes for me, that means that I am going to Pilates and like doing a
Mhm.
physical workout. Like sometimes for me, I physically need to just work out to get out of my head. Essentially, you're doing anything that gets you out of your head and into your body.
Mhm.
So, you know, working out or going for a walk, or for some people, it might be to actually get into doing art or whatever. Like from, I like my coloring book sometimes. That's another way in which I kind of surrender into and get really present with myself. So essentially what you're doing is you're finding an outlet. You can think of it that way, an outlet
Mhm.
for energy, so that instead of you being in your head or being in this like kind of ruminating energy, you're first of all surrendering it, but then you're also now finding an outlet for your energy to kind of think of it as a way to recalibrate or to shift back or to just be more present within yourself. So, again, depending on what's going on for you personally in your life, any of these options might be the helpful thing. Maybe it's taking a shower, maybe it's taking a nap. So it's kind of in those moments you're looking at thinking of it from the perspective of, okay, I've surrendered this. Now, what is the way in which I'm feeling called in this moment to find an outlet for my energy to come back to my centeredness, to come back to myself? maybe for some people it's meditation, but I find that oftentimes in these moments when we're overthinking, meditation
Yeah.
isn't really quite the answer. But for some people, it might be. We won't leave that off the table.
Mm-hmm.
But I do find that it's something more like you're doing something physically. You're picking up a paintbrush, you're going outside, you're working out, you're taking a shower, whatever,
Yeah.
playing with your kids, like whatever that might be. But thinking of it as a physical activity, something that where you're moving some part of your body and you are just allowing yourself to really be present. I find that that is really helpful. And I think of it, like I said, as a way to kind of come back to my center and like recalibrate. I think of it as like a
Mm-hmm.
recalibration.
That's really great. And it brought up a couple of things for me. The first one being what works for me when I'm just overthinking and going to those places. What I'll do is ask myself, okay, that's what you don't want to happen. Because I'm usually going down a rabbit hole
Right.
like, what is this? And how do I solve it? And how do I control it? Or what's going to happen? I try to go to what do you want happening? What's the best possible outcome?
Mm,
And try and visualize what do I want? What's the best case scenario in this situation, right? So trying to switch to that kind of mindset, and it was very powerful, for instance, in situations in life where, for instance, when we were moving to Canada, it was so stressful and I had so much anxiety. It was such a shift such a big transition in life that I started to develop that practice. Okay, this is all the things that scare you about what you're doing. What do you want it to be? What does it look like? Where do you live? How does it smell? Is it sunny? You're
yeah.
seeing the bear. You find a wonderful job, and you have make many new friends, and you get to travel and like
Yeah.
trying to think through those great scenarios. So that's something that really works for me. And when these things happen, it's like, okay, we're not going to ruminate on the problem and try and control a solution. If logic out the window,
Right.
what's going to happen next? What's the best thing that's going to happen next? And
Yes.
that makes it fun, light, and I guess it opens possibilities too, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Totally.
so I feel that helps a lot. And then the other thing that came up for me as you were talking about other outlets, there's so many traps too to start distracting ourselves from what we're feeling or thinking.
Mm,
So let's eat, let's watch TV,
right.
let's go on social media and doom scroll for
Yes.
hours. So trying to avoid those traps, because it's not about distracting yourself, it's about
Yeah.
channeling that energy in a positive way. And
Yeah.
also easier said than done. I do that all the time and I'm like, I can't keep thinking about this. I'm gonna go on Instagram and see how I
Right.
can distract myself for a little bit and just not think about it.
Yeah.
um, but I guess you're not doing anything productive spiritually in an energetic level. Just try and find a productive, healthy way to distract yourself
Right.
and get out of that energy or those thoughts. I guess that's the one thing that came up for me, because I do that a lot.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I mean, it's like a reflex almost now, because we have it so accessible. I think all of us have that.
yeah.
Like, I definitely have it too, where if I'm overwhelmed, it's like Instagram, like let me just scroll through, because it totally does take your mind away from that.
It's soothing, and you're just like, I need
Yeah.
to just shut down my
Yeah.
brain. So let's watch TV, and that is not
Yeah.
necessarily. Although you may find answers, because they'll find any and every way to
Yeah.
communicate with you. So it's not uncommon to find a post that you
That's
need to
true.
see, or a quote or something on a movie, and a piece of dialogue
Yeah.
that you're like, oh, that's exactly what I need to hear. So it's not to say you're not going to find answers there,
Right.
but there's potentially other ways, and also helpful to work other muscles, right? And try and
Right.
deepen your connection to the divine and allow those messages to come in and settle and calm, and just, yeah, definitely healthier to be outdoors,
Yeah.
uh, walking than on Instagram for sure.
Right, exactly, exactly. And I've definitely, not all the time, but I have kind of a little bit trying to get into a habit of noticing when I am just like automatically going to Instagram and then being like, am I trying to avoid something, or am I actually like, I try to find that line where it's like, okay, I just want to relax. So I do just want to scroll versus I am anxious and I'm scrolling
Actually,
because I'm trying to avoid this feeling, like there's that fine line that does exist. And so that awareness, just like asking myself that question, like, am I avoiding something right now? Or am I truly just, this is my form of relaxation?
yeah.
And so that I find can be helpful. But yeah, that's such a great point that you brought up, because it is important for us to be mindful of the difference between the outlet and what the activity is actually doing for us, which in other words, coming back to ourselves and feeling more grounded within ourselves, versus is the activity doing the opposite? Is it making me be just more distracted? I do find that if I am too much on social media, then I feel more ungrounded. I feel more like less creative. I feel disconnected from myself. Like, it does do that, even
Yeah.
though you think, oh, it's just an app, but it does. There's like it energetically pulls at you. So,
Mhm.
it's just really great awareness to have, and knowing yourself. And it's this whole process that we're talking about is also a great way to get to know yourself, and to get to know, you know, those moments where you can feel, okay, my creativity is draining right now as I do
Mhm.
this. Like, I need to stop,
Yeah.
or my cup is being filled because I just went for a walk and it feels really good, or whatever.
Yeah. And also inviting angels to like interact with you in those moments. Like, let's
Yeah.
go on a walk and let's see what we find out there, and
Yeah.
making them part of the process and inviting them in,
Mm-hmm.
or help me find the best outlet for this. And maybe the answer will come there. And maybe I'll meet the person I need to meet at the Pilates class, and that
Yes.
will figure this whole situation out.
Yeah.
So you just never know what's going to
Yeah.
lead to the solution or the next thing. So, yeah, leaning into them as a resource to show you what what do we do with this
Yeah.
energy, and how do I shift perspective, and how do we get out of this mindset, and inviting them to help you with that. I have one specific guardian angel that kind of supports me into like bringing me
Mm.
back to center or to
Yeah.
balance when I am like all over the place. So I do call on him. I'm like, please,
Yeah.
just, whatever it is you do, just do it now.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can help
I
me.
need that. Press the
I need
button.
that. Whatever
Press
that is.
the button.
Exactly. Like, I need that fix. But yeah, definitely calling on your guardian angels. If you do know specifically how they work with you, and try
Hmm.
and get them involved into that process. I find that is also helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Super helpful. And I think at the end of the day, it's not about necessarily, like, the goal isn't necessarily to get the solution. It's just to be in a place where you feel centered and
Will you
connected with
allow
yourself.
whatever's
In
happening
the
to
allowance. Yeah. And
happen?
I definitely notice that when I can just be in this present moment and just feel really just like calm, at ease, then the need for the solution or the need for the answer doesn't feel
Oh,
so
yeah.
pressing anymore, you know?
And that's what we just need to know,
Yeah.
right? So that's the
Yeah.
problem. I need to know what and how and when, and that's my problem, right? And I don't know why, but Archangel Gabriel is really into this conversation. So I guess that's a great archangel to call on
Yeah,
for this thing.
totally. Yeah, if you don't know your guardian angels, or you're not sure which angel to call on, Gabriel. He's the one who's just been very present as we've been
He's
talking.
been very present, and I don't know how to tell them apart so much at this point, but I do know how I feel him particularly, and he's been like almost poking my
Yeah.
ear all this throughout the conversation. Like, yeah, I know.
Yeah. I still need to see, like,
I
stop
feel
poking.
like you look at it, but yeah. So yeah, he's been very present and very interested in this conversation. So I guess when it comes to working on that muscle and strengthening your faith, and asking for the divine to come and work through you and help you see the way through a situation, challenging situation, or a solution, I guess Archangel Gabriel really
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
the one to
Absolutely. He's
go
like, me, call on me.
to.
Pick me, pick me.
Exactly. That's so funny.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. I love this conversation so much, and I'm so glad we talked about this and that this came through, and
What
I
needed
think
to happen? Yeah.
it's so important. And the other thing too that's coming through right now that I'll say is that it feels like all of this is also an ebb and flow. Like there will be moments on our journeys where we feel less in our like faith muscle and
Hmm.
kind of having to work it a little bit harder in order
Yeah.
to feel more connected. And then there'll be other times on your journey where you feel like, oh yes, like I feel so in the flow and I feel surrendered and I'm excited and it
Hmm.
doesn't feel as challenging. You know what I mean? And it's just it's normal to go through these ebbs and flows. That's the thing too that I've noticed is that I no longer fight it when I am in a space of like low energy or just feeling unmotivated or just feeling resistance or anything. I used to think the thing that used to come up for me before at the beginning of my journey was I would say like, oh, like what's wrong with me? Why am I still
Hmm.
feeling this way? I thought I worked through this already before
Right.
when this came up before. And instead, I've learned that it's not something that ever really goes away. I don't think it
Hmm.
gets maybe less, but it's I think that it's simultaneous with the fact that you're just more experienced and you've just seen this many times now and you just recognize now what it is, and so it doesn't weigh as heavily on you, and maybe maybe some situations still does, but it's not as intense because you've been through it and you're just like, oh okay, this is the resistance point again. Like we're in this ebb and flow again, here we go. And I think that over time it does help with being able to lean into the faith quicker and
Hmm.
be in the resistance part in less time. But we're all
But
human, and as long as we're human, we're gonna
yeah,
have
I
it.
was I was thinking that exactly. Like that's just the human in us, right?
Yeah,
That is
yeah,
just there, like
yes,
that.
exactly.
But being more patient and giving ourselves some grace when that does happen, it is important because it only adds to the situation, right? When you're like
Mhm.
punishing yourself, why am I like this? Why am I not waking up early? Why am I not meditating? Why am
Yeah,
I? It is just not helping anything, right? So if
yeah.
you are able, and again, easier said than done, but if you're able to just lean into it, okay, I need to just rest, and that's
Mhm.
part of the healing
Mhm.
that's happening right now, and we're just
Yep.
gonna go with this for a little bit, not so much that you just
Yeah.
don't help yourself,
Yeah.
but enough that you're not making the situation worse.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. So, on that note, I want to hear from our listeners. Let us know how faith feels like to you, or what are the processes that you like to go through? What's your go to way to support you in the surrender and support you in the trust? Let us know in the comments because your insights, your shares, what comes up for you is always helpful to other people as well. That's the key thing. It's just like it's whenever we share our personal experiences or what helps us, I find that that's always a golden nugget for someone else who's
Yeah.
reading the comments or whatever. So we want to hear from you. Let us know in the comments below. And I think that's it. Anything else that you want to ask our listeners or tell them?
No, we're just going through this together. And I guess that's what part of the whole point of the podcast is having these conversations that just, yeah, reflect on our shared experience, our shared human experience. So we all sit in that energy. We all go through those challenges and we're all finding our faith
Yep,
together. So yeah, let us know
absolutely.
how you feel about that.
Yeah, we're doing it together. I love it.
I know. And yeah, so funny that this is how the conversation
I
turned
know.
out.
Not
Exactly
planned at all. We did not plan this, not expected, but I think it was
what
perfect.
we both needed to hear,
Yes.
I guess.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. So thank you, angels. Thank you, everybody, for listening in, tuning in. We can't wait to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this episode, then make sure to share it with your friends, family, communities. If you are on YouTube, make sure you like this video. If you are listening on a podcast app, make sure that you rate the podcast. It helps us so that other people can find these episodes as well.
Mm-hmm.
And otherwise, we can't wait to see you again in the next episode.
See you next time. Bye.
Bye.